It's International Red Panda Day this week. First discovered in 1825, 50 years before the giant panda was ever spotted. This adorable creature is a carnivore, but 98% of its diet is bamboo. It sleeps 17 hours a day and uses its tails as wraparound blankets when it's cold. Its call sounds like a quack, and it also glows in the dark. Cute, aren't they? But also very important to be protected, because if the red panda is protected, that entire ecoregion is conserved. Here at Kaleidoscope, it's positive, daring, different. Welcome. On the radar today, making our skies smarter, navigating conflict terrains, and adrift yet rooted. Did you know Kaleidoscope is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn? Do join us, follow, and like us for more. To SriLanka Life, to CDB, and to the Daily Morning, thank you for being fabulous partners for this show.
She wins with CDB Wings, exclusive financial solutions for women.
It's CDB Snapshot, where we look back at the week that was. Sri Lanka's economy grows by 4.9% year-on-year in the second quarter of 2025. The Sri Lankan government targets $6.5 billion in revenue from key export crops by 2030. The Central Bank of Sri Lanka is set to circulate a new 2,000 rupee note in public soon. The Asian Development Bank expects to provide $790 million in new loans to Sri Lanka this year. China announces it's building a new nature reserve on the heavily contested Scarborough Shoal. Owen Cooper becomes the youngest actor to win an Emmy as Best Supporting Actor in Adolescence. Costumed runners in France's Marathon du Médoc drink wine and eat oysters and steak, enjoying music by 50 different orchestras along the way.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. SriLanka Life.
Welcome. This is SriLanka Life News Capsule. Sri Lanka's aviation industry is on the cusp of a digital revolution. From biometrics to seamless passenger journeys, technology is reshaping the way we travel. Joining us on Kaleidoscope News Capsule is SITA's Asia Pacific President Sumesh Patel with insights into the latest innovations and his vision for smarter, connected travel in Sri Lanka. What key digital transformations in initiatives are you seeing shaping the future of our airports and of our airlines?
It's really growing, and it's a good news. It's growing close to about 10% year on year, and that puts a lot of stress on the infrastructure. So we are working very closely with ASL and Sri Lankan Airlines to deploy a lot of new technologies, and mainly focusing on self-service and providing a better passenger experience to the passenger traveling here in Sri Lanka.
What innovations are you seeing as game changers which will foster smarter, more connected travel for Sri Lankans and those visiting Sri Lanka as well, given that it has to align with passenger experiences internationally?
One thing which we really see is the digital travel credential. So basically using your digital identity at various different touch points. And while you mentioned that not just in Sri Lanka, but passenger arriving from them, so how can we provide the similar experience from the passenger from anywhere they are traveling? So for example, some of the technologies which we have recently deployed is the check-in kiosk. So how can that be expanded not just to Sri Lankan Airlines, but to the other international airlines which are flying here? Similarly, in terms of automatic backdrop, so how can they leverage that? So there are a number of technologies which we are working with, both with ASL and Sri Lankan, to enhance the passenger experience overall.
Sri Lanka is a hub. However, How do we compare the adoption of aviation technologies with our other Asia Pacific neighbors, for instance?
Sri Lanka is really forward looking. So they are looking at technology, and the best part is that every airport in the world or airline in the world are at a different stage of maturity. And one of the reasons is that the dynamics are quite different in every country and every region. The passenger profile, everything changes, right? So for example, if you go to Europe, they are used to using self-service. You don't have anything else. Whereas if you look in our part of the world in Asia, you need to have the right mix of using the technology and also the passenger being served for a certain one. So there are technologies which can help to address both needs.
What would you stress as being the priorities and the needs that this country needs to remain competitive when it comes to regional travel?
For any passenger traveling to any country, and for example Sri Lanka, the first experience or the first thing they see is the airport and see how smooth their experience is and how soothing is in terms of the arrival, and that's the first impression for any country. And similarly, when they go out, do they have long queues or it's a walk-through experience? So Sri Lanka clearly, as we said, that they are looking at for it to work, what is required is the complete ecosystem. So what about airlines, airports and government to be aligned, and that's what we are trying to do, and that we do, and that's our job, because we are a neutral service provider and work with all stakeholders to bring back, because the data from arrival needs to be shared with immigration, it's shared with the airlines. So how can we help to make sure that it's the entire ecosystem works as smoothly as possible?
And now, here's a look at our markets this week. At the Colombo Stock Exchange, the all-share price index moved down to the 20,800 point level on profit taking. This week, a supply surplus kept a cap of $64.50 per barrel on WTI oil. Gold prices created new records, with the price per ounce moving ever closer to $3,700 per ounce, with renewed buying by central banks. Age is really a number. We've heard of fabulous grandmas, but none are as fabulous as Margaret Chola, known as legendary Glam. An internet sensation, she swaps outfits with her fashion stylist granddaughter and redefines the phrase, cool grandma. From the war zones of Iraq to the climate-threatened shores of the Pacific, Pushpi Weerakoon has been at the heart of some of the world's most urgent crises. A force in peace building, migration and gender justice, her work spans continents, conflicts and cultures. In this compelling Q&A on Kaleidoscope Let's Talk, she opens up about navigating fragile futures, building lasting peace, and what it truly means to serve humanity at the front lines of global transformation. So you've worked on some of the world's most complex crises, from post-conflict Iraq to the Rohingya crisis in Bangladesh. Now, how do you navigate all these fragile and often politically charged environments?
When I'm told that we are going to be posted for a mission, what happens is you're briefed. And then the briefing could be very brief too. We educate ourselves. So it could be a report that's been written, or one thing that I do, I make sure, is I read about the history and the norms and the rituals of that particular country, because that helps you when you go to that country to understand the context. And then once you're there, what we do is we do need assessments, and we also do stakeholder mapping to understand the conflict at the ground level, which almost all the time becomes a total different story to what you hear when you're outside, right? So that's really important. So it's not like we just parachute in and provide solutions. We go and assess the situation, speak to the local context, which involves the leadership, the local leadership, and also the international leadership, and also the other international agencies like INGOs, NGOs, and the other UN agencies. And then we figure out what is the most conducive way of going about helping the people.
So you were instrumental in developing Sri Lanka's first office for reparation and also led key efforts in drafting legislation. What makes these efforts more meaningful when you have to especially work with survivors of conflict related in sexual abuse, for instance?
The most important thing in reparation is that we listen to the survivors, give them what they need. So in terms of the Sri Lankan reparation bill and the act to get that information, almost 1.5 years I traveled across Sri Lanka to all the districts and little pockets of Gram Sevaka Vasams to speak to these little pockets of survivors who have at that time migrated also much more deeper and more onto the southern sides to understand the current needs, because the needs change, right? So even if you are being given a certain amount maybe in the 80s and the 90s, given the current situation, that's not enough. So they would tell you that. So you need to listen to them. That's important. Listening to them and figuring out what it is that they need is the most important thing in providing reparation.
You've contributed to transitional justice in Sri Lanka, in Iraq, and also various other places. How can countries reconcile their demand for justice with the political will for peace?
One thing you need to keep in mind is transition justice and say reconciliation should be done together. It's not like first try reconciliation or then transition justice. It should be done at the same moment so that you will understand the issues that are popping up based on the survivors' need. It's really, really important that the locals speak up and voice their opinion and let the leaders know what they want so that the nation would not be silent.
You work with displaced persons, with refugees, with survivors. How do you keep human dignity at the center of a humanitarian landscape?
The focus again is on the beneficiaries. It's what they need. Our focus is to figure out the root causes of the problem. How can we deal with the immediate issues at hand? And then once you speak to the locality, you understand what's needed. And that's what should be provided. What you do is you provide your technical knowledge to make things better. It's not like you will bring in these unknown solutions to a locality and try to change the locality. That should never be done. So in scenarios like that, I think the most successful way is for us to be, as we say, locally global.
With all these decades of impactful work behind you, what's the one change you still hope to see in the world within your lifetime?
Societies that have inculcated empathy from their traditional ways, rituals, beliefs or norms, or even the modern sense, has a better way of dealing with conflict. Like I said, conflict is going to be there for the rest of our life. It's about how you deal with it. So I hope all these AI and social media and everything we are coming up with now these days would be geared towards that, would help build cultures and nations with empathetic people.
In 1995, Anushiya Sundaralingam travelled from Colombo to Jaffna on foot, by tractor, by van and by boat. A broken boat. Her story is not unusual for those who lived in those times, but what is different is that Anushiya pierces those memories with her deeply personal experience of leaving behind her roots in Sri Lanka to take up residence in Northern Ireland.
This work is about escape and survival. In 1989, I left Sri Lanka during the Civil War, and in 1995, I returned back home, traveling dangerous routes, which including taking a small boat. So I traveled in a smaller boat, wooden broken boat, and at night time, in the dark, I'm telling a story of my own and Tamil diaspora community story and a universal story.
An award-winning multidisciplinary artist who was originally a printmaker, in Adrift, this performance artist shows a body of work that is both evocative and deeply rooted in her identity, culture and heritage.
This collection is about who I am and where I come from, and it's about my journey. It's inspired by my Sri Lankan background and the impact of war on me and others. This series of work connects with my culture identity and helps me to connect with others and deal with trauma.
And so that's it on Kaleidoscope. Don't forget to join us next week.